All right. Welcome, leaders. I am so excited today because today we have a very important podcast guest, Kerri Jacobs. Hi, Kerri. Good to see you today.
Hello. It's brilliant to see you, Rachel.
I know. And Kerri and I will share more about how we know each other, but we'll go back years where we were at the Goog together and doing some trainings for leaders and all kinds of cool stuff. So Kerri, I want to share a little bit about you, and then would you be willing to lead us in your version of a pause?
Of course. Happy to.
Okay, awesome. So I'll just share a little snippet and then I'll hand it over to you because I'm sure you'll do a much better job of sharing who you are than I can. But Kerri is really a specialist in working with high performing leaders and teams. I mentioned you already were a Googler. So you did that and you're obsessed with empathy. You are the capital E empathy guru. And I'm just so thrilled because we talk all things emotional intelligence here on the Pausecast. So I think we're going to have a really good discussion as well. You graduated from the Stanford University's CCARE, which is exciting about compassion training. You've
Yep,
done a lot of different work around that. I know you're also from Scotland.
that's right.
So I'm excited that you are bringing that world to us. Which part of Scotland are you from?
I'm from a town called Pennycook, just south of Edinburgh.
Oh, Edinburgh. Yes, I've been there. It's so cool there and the castle and everything. And so let's get into it. Anything else you'd want to add? Anything else that I just totally gave you a very high level description there, but what else is
Oh,
going on with you?
that sounds good. My main focus is I work on leading with empathy for leaders and managers, although I do work with individual contributors too. But because I believe empathy is the cure to everything that we face right now in the workplace and outside of it.
Yeah, and we've talked about that, whether it's diversity and inclusion, whether
Mm-hmm.
it's leaders with compassion and just going in high performance teams. So yes, thank you for stating that. And let's jump into your pause. I would love to participate.
Brilliant. Well, it's more of a reflection, Rachel. I have a very strong suspicion that the listeners to the podcast already index very high on the empathy and compassion scale. So, this is likely a very self selecting group of empaths and compassion warriors listening right now. But even so, I think it's worth reflecting on why empathy matters to all of us, wherever we fall on that spectrum. Now, my favorite definition of empathy is that it's just tuning yourself into someone else's frequency. And that can mean feeling someone's pain or frustration, but it can also mean understanding someone's anger or sharing their joy. And sometimes the person's frequency is clear to us, right? We can see using body language or tone of voice, facial expressions, and other cues. We can tune into quickly to how that person's feeling. But other times we have to look harder or we have to ask. So, as someone from Scotland, where we can sometimes be emotionally stunted, and in a world before COVID, I would have always cautioned asking someone outright if they're suffering because I don't want to embarrass them. I don't want to pry. It's none of my business. But in the world that we are now, where everything has changed, I advocate asking always, not a cursory, how are you? Because that's just going to solicit a normal response. But instead, how are you this morning? Or here's how I'm feeling. What about you? So I, like you, was a high functioning burnout case. And I wonder a lot if I could have been helped so much sooner, if I'd had someone truly pay attention and ask me if I needed anything. So to everyone listening, obviously you prioritize your own mental health and use all the sage advice that Rachel and her guests share. But I want you right now to think about one or two people that you interact with every day. You may already have someone that jumps to mind because you just feel that something might be off with them. Um, and think about a way you can empathize with them. Invite them for a walk, bring a bottle of water to their desk, hang out just a little bit longer when you're chatting, and make sure you offer them the chance to share what's going on. And even if they don't, let them know that you're there if they ever need a judgment-free listening ear. So make a little plan to check in with those people this week and see if you can find a way to repeat that every week, either them or someone else. Think of it as putting in your empathy reps. Because in a world where so many of us are high functioning, suffering in silence, you simply have no idea how important that check-in could be to them.
That is gold. Thank
How are,
you.
how are you doing?
I'm just taking that in that reflection and how simple it is. I'm just reflecting that that's all common knowledge. I know
Yeah,
this, and a lot of us know this. And yet, how often do we do it? How often am I being of service in a way that can help me know someone and understand them better?
I think when you've been through, because my story is so similar to yours,
Mm.
working at a large tech company, completely reaching burnout and, that forced pause. I think when you've been through that, you start recognizing it in other people, in their faces, in their eyes, in their
Yes.
breathing patterns. And they may not have even recognized it yet themselves. But I feel like we have like this special radar to recognize it in other people. And I just feel like I always feel obligated now to say, hey, here's what happened to me. This might be going on with you. Like, should we talk about it?
And that's so comforting and also probably alarming in a way
Yes,
where most people aren't really going to that level
true.
of truth, really.
Yeah.
So thank you for just giving us some guidance on
Mm-hmm.
how to approach it and what could be done. My personal story of this is I'm living with my in-laws right now,
Mm-hmm.
and they're from another country,
Yeah.
and it's really hard to practice empathy sometimes because it's mutual space. It's been months, like there's just a lot, and so what a powerful reminder. Little things I could do: bring a glass of water,
Absolutely.
bring a glass of water. Ask them what are they cooking, what are they making, and I am
That's
doing
right.
that. I just think there's
I'm
always
sure
more
you
you can do.
are.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I also think there's a lot of resistance I have too, because I'm like, oh, and again, I gotta ask. Like that's just the human condition, though.
It
And
is, and I don't want everyone to become a therapist. I mean, the issue with pushing that door open is that it might open wide, and then you're the recipient of a lot of pain and suffering coming from the other person. So I'm not advocating that you do it so that you can take on all those challenges, but
yeah,
simply that you can at least listen, because I think listening is one of the most strongest acts of caring that you can do. Strongest acts of compassion is just to listen to someone,
yeah.
and if they want help, then finding that for them.
Yeah, that's so helpful. So thank you. And I just go back to how you and I met. So
Yeah.
for those of you, I know no one knows this story other than us, but well, maybe some people out there know. But the idea is, Kerri and I kind of crossed paths before. Well, there was just different stages of burnout, but we did do some volunteer coaching or I guess
Yeah.
it's classing training together. That's what it's called, training. And we had so much in common. It was inevitable that I think we both knew our paths would keep crossing and also lead us to other places outside of what we were currently doing. And, being so passionate about it, I know you are, and I am. I just think there's a calling from the corporate world for leaders to know that this is such a hunger. The world of empathy is just starting to crack open in work cultures where it feels okay to talk about it. Maybe sometimes it's not okay, right? These are all the quote unquote
Yep.
soft skills, the EQ. But the reality is, I'm wondering if you have anything to share around this, that like actually empathy is one of the strongest leader traits
Yeah,
where,
I mean, it's interesting. I did some research recently on where the word soft skills even came from, and it has its roots in the military, where the
yes,
hard skills were being able to climb the ladder, or being able to fire the gun, and the soft skill was being able to communicate one-on-one with your subordinate or something. So I even hate that term, don't you?
I
And
hate
it's
it
so
too.
funny that that's where it came
We're not
from.
going to use it again. That's over. That's not.
No, I agree. And I love what I love about what you bring to your podcast, Rachel, is just the idea that everything is scientifically validated. Like, I do feel like we live in the world now where diversity, equity, inclusion has now been recognized as a business imperative, right? It's not just a nice to have. And I am seeing the shift now with empathy and compassion in the workplace as a similar thing. So if you think about the cost of not having compassion and empathy in your workplace in terms of staff turnover and morale and, you know, long-term leaves and retention of staff, especially those from, you know, minority groups, it's expensive. Without empathy and
Yes, very
compassion,
expensive.
workplaces can become powerful amplifiers of human suffering. So it's really, it's something that I think leaders are coming around to understanding what the return on investment is for this. It is going to take a lot of work from people like me and you and a bit of generational shift. But the proof is in the pudding. There are so many examples now of strong pieces of research showing that when you do treat your employees with kindness, with empathy, with compassion, they are more likely not only just to overperform and, you know, do things that you never expected them to be able to do, but they stay at the company longer, they attract other top talent, and, you know, it helps the bottom line. So there are no downsides. It's just a matter of convincing some people that might still have that feeling of, you know, the workplace needs to be somewhere where if you're not sacrificing, then you're not deserving, and having that work devotion mentality,
Yeah.
which thankfully I've seen the light about.
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, I want to hear more about your story and like how you came to know all of this, really. So love to hear that. And then the other thing I'm thinking about right now is, where do you start? Can you do both? Like, can we have a high performing culture and team and leader and have empathy? Like, I don't like, do I need to sacrifice anything? And I'm wondering, I'm sure many listeners out there, like you said, index high with empathy. So what else could we be doing? How do we build that empathy muscle? But let's just start back with
Yeah.
your story. So tell us a little bit about how you became this empathy extraordinaire.
Well, it came in a pause, right? Because you know better than anyone that epiphanies happen in that pause. Now, sadly, my pause was medically induced with burnout. I was a sales leader at Google, and I was really just struggling with the grind and had some management issues and just the usual stuff. My body started telling me before my brain did that, you know, this wasn't working, and I had to take a break and get some medical intervention. And I should say at this point, I identify as a straight, white, cisgendered female who has health insurance. Like, I walk through this earth with so much privilege afforded to me. And I know not everyone can be able to step away from work and you know, just have that kind of medical leave to recover. So I know how grateful I am for that. In that pause, I definitely felt like I did have my epiphany, which was, I don't want to return to the job I was doing. It's making me sick. It's killing me. I'm really miserable. I have, from the outside, the perfect life, a fantastic marriage, two healthy children. I was living in New York. I was living my dream, working for a great company. And I couldn't get out of bed in the morning. I didn't want to go on. And I realized that the part of my job that I did love was the part around nurturing and caring and really bringing to my leadership style all of those qualities, in addition to making sure that the quota gets hit and the business, you know, is achieving great things. And I think, having had some wonderful managers in the past and some terrible ones, it was just very clear to me where my skill set fell. I've often done these personality tests where they tell you, you know, what kind of leader you are. And I always felt a little mortified that I would come out on these, I would score so highly on the kind of caring side of things. And I would score lower on the typical type A sales leader personality traits. And that made me feel like a fraud. And now I know that I was just bringing something different to it, and something that most people need more of. So I was really fortunate. I decided that I wanted to create a program at the company I was working at to reach leaders and tap into their empathy and compassion. And my VP at the time said, yeah, go for it. And I built the program, started to study compassion externally, like at the course at Stanford. And then COVID hit. And I think prior to COVID, most of my workshop attendees were female leaders or, you know, men from the LGBTQ plus community who kind of were already bought into this. They were believers like me and you. But when COVID hit, I reached a much, much wider population of previously skeptical leaders who were realizing that now that they couldn't use the force of their own ego and charm to get things done because they're behind a screen, they're like, maybe I need to learn how to actually communicate with people. Yeah. So I've been doing that ever since. And it was really, I really focus on the actual practical things leaders can do. So although we talk about the conceptual stuff, I'm telling them, start your day with an email thanking someone. Show up 2 minutes early to every single meeting so that you can see who else is there early and have a chance to break some
That's
ice.
a good one. That's such a good one.
Yeah. So
early. What a concept.
I know, because I've worked with a leader that does that, and she will tell you that like some of the relationships she's forged in those 60, 90, 120 seconds before the meeting starts are the strongest ones she has with people on her team, right? And other simple things like that, just making a note somewhere when you learn something about someone on your team, the name of their kids, what football team they support, what allergies they have, like just simple things like that, so that in subsequent conversation, you sound like someone that cares enough to have remembered it. So as long as it's done authentically, my whole thing is, here are, 40 things you can do that will, help you exercise those empathy muscles and just make people feel like they're heard and that they belong.
Yeah. Oh, that's gold right there. So thank you for sharing those nuggets of just how to. I love like for me, I love all of that. And yes, finding something else out. And I would say, if a couple of things come to mind. One is, for me, my thing is birthdays. I love to track birthdays. I may not remember even to wish them a happy birthday, but I'm tracking it and I know it for my clients. And then I make a note and I could send them a card, just something easy.
So that I love that. Anything like that. I do believe in building it into a system. And also knowing, though, Rachel, that everyone's different. So personally, I don't want balloons at my desk. I don't need anyone knowing it's my birthday. That would be the most embarrassing thing for me. So knowing how everyone else on your team is feeling, but having a consistent way of marking those moments, whether it's babies being born or new people joining the team or promotions, doing it consistently. Because one of the things that can erode empathy and certainly erode that psychological safety in the workplace are feelings of favoritism. So it's like, oh, well, when this person got married, we all donated and bought this big gift. When this person on the team got married, I don't think we did anything. Those kind of disparities are probably never intentional, but they can be blown out of all proportion in the person's head. I have people who will stalk their manager's calendar, and if the manager cancels their one-on-one, but still has one-on-ones with other people, and you and I know that that's probably just done because something else really important came up, they will jump to some illogical conclusion with some paranoia involved that they're less important than everyone else. And the story they start telling themselves becomes something that's, really distracting and inaccurate. So I think exactly what you just said, just marking those moments and being consistent.
I love the consistency and systematizing for what works for you, right? And that is a pause in itself, an intentional shift in behavior. That's what the definition of a pause is that I have. Right. And so what is that? And I think as a team, even celebrating birthdays, it doesn't need to be balloons at the desk, but what if it was a group card, or, now everyone's hybrid remote working. So you do a virtual Zoom, having fun 30-minute party,
Absolutely.
No agenda other than celebration and enjoying each other.
And then even those reach outs, I always advocate that leaders, and you don't have to be a leader to do this, but that you set aside time in your calendar. I call it recognition time. Yeah. And maybe it's 15 minutes every Friday. And maybe you're good at doing this in real time. But for someone like me who's gets very absent-minded,
I need to schedule it for sure.
Yeah, I schedule it and I look back at my calendar for the last week and I think, who should I reach out to just like check in and be like, oh, I saw this article, I know you're going to be really interested in it, or here's a job opening I think you might be interested in, or simply like, how's your mom? As long as it's coming from a place of authenticity, it doesn't matter that you scheduled it, because for the person that receives that message, you have the power, especially if you are in a more senior role than them, to change the trajectory of their day, week, month
Yeah.
just by telling them something positive.
Yeah. Oh, that's super good too. Yeah. And it's about what works for you, is what I hear you
Yeah,
saying.
definitely. I would never want anyone to leave my workshop and be like, oh, I must do this, I must do that. It has to be authentic to your style. But the truth is, these things only take seconds, and yet the impact that they have is much, much, much bigger. It's disproportionate. And we all have the time. We all have the time to say hello, to check in, to share something that you think would be valuable. We just sometimes forget to do it.
Yeah. Well, then that's the thing. We all get swirled up in our own world of to-dos and we lose track of time and then we forget. So the key is this, because is the consistency, and how do you keep
Mm.
on track for that? And it doesn't need to take a lot of time. Like you said, 15 minutes on a Friday, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 2 minutes a day, whatever,
Yeah,
whatever
exactly.
it is. Yeah. Yeah. And let me ask you this question, because I think when I think of empathy, this goes automatically to putting someone else in, putting yourself in someone else's shoes. And I came across this concept when I was studying the Daniel Goleman content for his EI courses about self-empathy,
Yeah.
having empathy for yourself. And so can you share a little bit about how that works? Because I think it is great to have empathy and build that within teams and within our worlds professionally and personally, of course. I also think we're kind of like the last resort of practicing this on ourselves, and that's this
We are.
compassion that you're thinking about, right? So can you help me at least understand what is it that I could do differently if I'm really working to build up my own compassion for me slash self-empathy? And is there a difference?
No, I don't think so. I mean, compassion broadly is a response to suffering, right? Whereas empathy is a response to all sorts of emotions. So, you're having empathy for someone who's scared, or for someone who's lonely, or for someone who's thrilled and happy. So
Yeah.
when you reflect that on yourself, it's similar. One thing that helped me was just to understand that kind of self-care, which to me sometimes feels self-indulgent. I don't know why
Mm.
I balk at the term, but it absolutely isn't. It's the opposite of self-abuse, right? You're just taking care of yourself. And I think if I'm asking you to have empathy for other people, all I'm asking you to do is to understand how they might be feeling. So if you turn that on yourself, it's just understanding, why am I feeling this way?
Mm.
What
Mm.
could be causing it? Am I okay to feel this way right now? Or is there something that I need to do to kind of intervene to change my mood and to feel slightly differently?
Yeah.
I do think it's the most important thing. I mean, I work with the population, which is people managers. And you'll know from your burnout studies that they are one of the most affected populations when it comes to burnout, because managers are caregivers, whether they want to be or not. And they're not only managing up, but they're looking after everyone below them. And they can be the forgotten few in the middle.
Yeah.
And so, one of the things I'm very conscious of is when I'm working with that population and I'm telling them how to have empathy for the people that they lead, they have to stop first and make sure that they are taking care of themselves, because the burnout rates among people managers are extraordinarily high. And I think some
Yeah.
of that comes from the burden of the work, but also from that fear of showing any vulnerability once you get into a position of leadership. And that's what we're trying to
Mm-hmm.
tackle, right? That stigma that it's okay. If you are suffering and you need to take a couple of days off, not because you have food poisoning, but because you're just at an all-time emotional low and you need a couple of days to regroup, I advocate telling your team that. I know it's hard. I know that in some places there may still be, retaliation or repercussions for being that vulnerable. But I think if you're a leader, you kind of owe it to everyone that reports to you to be honest, because you will then implicitly give them permission to do the same thing when they need it. So I've
Mm-hmm.
worked with a leader once who put on her out of office reply, not in the office this week. I just need a mental recharge. And if you need me, I'll be at this pond feeding these ducks, and I'll share some photographs afterwards.
Some
And
breadcrumbs.
And everybody who got her out of office reply when she came back to work the following week, everyone was like, how are the ducklings and how are the ducks? And, and it was just lovely. And, no one was saying, oh my God, is she burnt out? Or, what happened to her? She's overwhelmed. She's not robust enough. Any of those conversations just dissipated and people just focused on the fact that good for her. She needs a break. Of course she does. And then, so that's why I think it's really important. So stay true to yourself. I'm saying all this as a complete hypocrite because I'm working too hard at the moment and I'm not taking enough time for myself.
Yeah.
But in an ideal state, you get it.
Yeah, exactly. That's such a great example. Kudos, leader, whoever you were, to do that, because that's setting the precedent and the normalizing of caring for yourself and whatever it takes. And yeah, I agree. It's hard, like walking, here I am, pause person, pause queen, and I do more. Most people have told me you do more, Rachel, than most people I know. And how are you even pausing? And I think of it like, you're right. And I also know when I know, and I am also learning, so I can choose to pause intraday or whatever I need to do, but I'm not perfect. We're all learning this. And I think it's one step at a time. It's one pause at a time. It's one person at a time.
It's funny. I was speaking to my husband the other day, but you have to do what works for you. Now, I've discovered recently that the pause that works for me is having a shower, right? Having a shower midday or maybe even twice during the day. If I have a 30-minute block that's free, I might have a shower because that water therapy
that's so good.
Makes me feel so good. Now, I think what I had to get over were these was the sociological thing I had in my head that it would be wasteful to have showers, more than once a day. Like my mother's voice is echoing in my head saying, don't waste the hot water. And I have to now just...
Well, in Scotland, I'm sure that was like pretty popular in cold days.
But now I'm giving myself permission. I'm like, you know what? Yeah, maybe it's costing a few dollars for me to have a shower, but I can measure just how much happier I am when I've done that. And whether that's a shower, whether it's stroking your cat, whether it's stepping outside in the sunshine, whether it's watching something funny on YouTube, or just texting your friend, those things, those go-tos that help you in your self-care. I think it doesn't have to be a bath with candles. It can just be something as simple as watching an episode of Friends.
Yeah, it's exactly. That's 100% agreed. It has to work for you. And I love that you do showers. You do showers. Like, way to go, Kerri. I think that's awesome. You're giving other people permission.
I'm sorry about the state of California for all the water use.
Yeah, the droughts and all of that. But either way, I think what you're sharing is a really important point. And I also think this theme that I want to just name it in our conversation is feminine leadership, where there's these values of care, creation, beingness, appreciation, compassion, built creating, like they're the themes of the values from the feminine that are really under indexed in our corporate world, where we've overemphasized the masculine, which is the driving results, the OKRs, the time in the office, anything that's building and doing. And that's okay. We need that, but we are a little out of whack, as we have told in testimonials for our own burnout. And we know 1 out of 3 people are burning out in healthcare, 1 out of 2, probably HR and in general after COVID. So there's got to be something that's different. And this is what it is feminine leadership. And so I, commend you for bringing that torch to bear and holding that high for anyone. And you can be anyone. You don't need to be female. You could be any gender. And this is just the values that I think really stand true, that have gone under index in the world as we know it from just our last century. Do you agree?
I do. So I agree completely. I mean, I remember reading recently that feeling the need to be busy all the time is actually a trauma response, and it's fear-based distraction from what we'd be forced to acknowledge if we slowed down. Yeah, exactly. I mean, the interesting thing about empathy from a gender perspective, and I do agree with you, but looking at it from a gender perspective, we are all born with the same capability of empathy. This is scientifically proven. But it can be enhanced. It's not a fixed trait. And if you just think about the way way that we raise boys differently to the way that we raise girls, although it's changing. But for those of us in our generation and above, like, you know, so much of that is we're conditioned to behave in a certain way. And I applaud anyone who's bringing those other traits into their leadership style, regardless of their gender or how high up they are in the hierarchy. I mean, without getting into politics, you know, it's definitely, we look at someone like Joe Biden, and whatever you think of him, I don't want to, you know, go down that path. The man definitely uses empathy. He has it. He's had personal loss, unimaginable loss in his life. And he will use those stories and use those experiences to connect with other people suffering from those losses. That doesn't make him weak in doing so. And I think the more we can see leaders doing that, expressing their own vulnerability. Satya Nadell's another fantastic one from Microsoft, who talks a lot about the experiences with his son and how that has influenced the way that he connects with other humans in the world. We all have an empathy story in our background. We all, you know, our childhood is our empathy jungle gym. Whether you're going through a divorce, or, you know, whether you had issues with sibling rivalry, or you were bullied at school, we've all been there. And then it's using those experiences in a positive way to help others, and not succumbing to the horrible belief that if I'm not sacrificing, then I'm not worth it, you know.
Yes. If I keep it all bottled up, I'm going to be better.
Yes. That work is some kind of extreme endurance sport, you know. It shouldn't. You should deserve to work in a workplace where people care about you and your well-being. That's basic.
Yeah. And it starts with us, is kind of the theme I'm hearing from you, right? Like, it's me who can share that. And I take a risk, and it's very courageous, and it's hard.
And it's hard. And sometimes it doesn't work out. I mean, I know that after my own burnout experience, returning to the workplace, I don't know about you, but I'm very conscious that there were conversations that I was part of where people would call me vulnerable, or, you know, she's not ready to take on large projects. And is she robust enough? And, you know, that's simply because I prioritize my mental health, which is ironic, because if I hadn't, I wouldn't even have been there
right back where you were,
to be considered for this work. Yeah.
Yes, I totally agree. And it's just a testament, I think, to your own self-compassion for knowing what you needed, and the awareness. And we all can get there. And I'd say, you know, great job being an example that we can all follow. And I think, you know, as we wrap this up, I think about the vulnerability of where I can go. So for anyone out there who's wondering, you know, what could I do? How could I try this? Just share something that you're afraid to say, and see where it goes. And it might be a one-on-one. It might not be about a huge group of people, but you got to start somewhere, and start small. And it could be with someone as a total stranger. Like, it doesn't need to be someone you know. And sometimes that's easier.
I know. I love that. I think the next time someone asks you, how are you? And this could be someone serving you in a supermarket, or like your boss, or your partner. Just before you say, good, thanks, how are you? Just have a moment to think, am I? And it's okay for you to say, I'm a little overwhelmed this week. And that's enough, right? You've shared something. You've opened the avenue to that conversation. And see how it goes. I think 9 times out of 10, you're going to realize that when you do talk about something that you're slightly vulnerable enough about, people are so kind, and they'll reciprocate, and they'll thank you for your vulnerability. And you just build a permission structure for them to do the same thing, especially if you're in a position of power.
Yeah. Oh, so good. These are great. And thank you for all of these tips. We're gonna wrap. Is there anything else, Kerri, that you can share as a final tip for us? And how can we find out more about you? Where do we find you?
So my website is leadingwithempathy.com, and I'm also on LinkedIn. I would say one of the most fun things I get to say is that, you know, I mentioned that your entire childhood is like your jungle gym for empathy. One of the gateway drugs to empathy is fiction. So I would say, you know, maybe you've never had the experience of being adopted, or maybe you've never had the experience of being the captain of a ship. Whatever it is, you can read a book, you can watch a movie, you can immerse yourself in a TV show where you understand what it's like to be someone other than you. And that's all good practice for us. So I think I'm just giving your listeners permission to watch as much Netflix as possible and to chalk it up to, they're
Can be a
just
pause. Hey,
they're
that's all
putting their
good.
pause in and they're getting their empathy
Intentional.
reps in at the same time. Yes.
That's such a great piece of guidance. So go for some fiction, watch
Yeah.
something, read something,
Challenge
and
yourself. Do it with someone who lives a life that is very different from yours and see how that feels.
yeah. Oof. All right. Well, thank you very much, Kerri,
Thank
for all
you.
your wisdom and sharing more as the empathy evangelist and practitioner that you are. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I'm just so grateful that you shared today and that you're here. It's great to be with you. Thanks so much.
I'm so grateful, and you should know just how much of an inspiration you are to me and so many others. So you paved the way, and we're all just like following in your footsteps. So thank you, Rachel.
Oh, my dear. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. I feel you.